Okay, so let's have a look at deriving the quadratic formula. So this is the formula we're going to derive. X is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And that is really finding the roots of a quadratic function that will look like this. So you got f of x is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. Now a, b, and c are all constants, and the x is going to be the variable. So if you take, for example, the x and the y-axis, let's say looking like this, and let's say our function looks something like this. What we're doing is finding these 2 points here. We're finding the x value here and the x value here when we use this formula. So there's going to be an x here, let's say x1, and our y then is going to be 0. Let's call this one x2. Our y value there is going to be 0. So we're going to find, what this formula does actually is find the x values when f of x is equal to 0, when this function here is equal to 0. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. We want to find what x is when y is equal to 0. So the rest of this derivative here is going to be isolating the x value here on the left hand side. So we want to get x on its own, everything else on the right hand side. We should end up with this here. So let's start. First thing I'm going to do is just get rid of this a here. So I'm going to divide across by a. So that will give me x squared plus b over a x plus c over a is equal to 0. So I've just gotten rid of the a in front of the x squared. What I'm going to do now is do what's called completing the square. Now I've done that in a previous video. If you want to have a look at that, if you're still unsure about it, just have a look at that video. But I'll go through it now anyway. So I'm going to complete the square for this quadratic equation. So the way we do that is we take the coefficient of x, which is b over a, we half it, so I'm going to multiply by a half, and then we square it. And what I'm going to do is take this here, all of this, I'll simplify it in a second, but I'm going to take it, I'm going to add it and subtract it in here. So let's do that. So we've got b on the top, we've got a times 2, which is 2a, and we're going to square that. So b is just b squared, and 2a is going to become 4a squared. So what I'm going to do now is just take the x squared plus b over ax, and what I'm going to do is add and subtract the b squared over 4a squared. So I've added it, so I'm going to subtract it to get rid of it, over 4a squared, and I've also got the plus c over a out here. So all I've done there really is just added and subtracted something in here. So I haven't changed this equation here. So what I'm going to do next is take the first 3 terms here and I'm going to factorize those. So let's do that. So what you'll find is that'll become x plus b over 2a times x plus b over 2a. Out here then, I've got these 2 terms here. So what I'm going to do with these is bring these over to the right hand side of the equation. What I'll end up with is b squared over 4a squared minus c over a on the right hand side of the equation. Okay, so on the left hand side then, this will just become x plus b over 2a squared. On the right hand side, what I'm going to do is just add these 2 fractions. So the common denominator you can see here is just going to be 4a squared. So that'll give me a b squared here. Here I'll end up with 4a squared divided by a is 4a. Multiply that by c, that'll give me 4ac. Okay. What I'm going to do next then is just square root both sides. So if I square root the left hand side, I'll get x plus b over 2a. On the right hand side, I'll just get the square root of the right hand side. but I'll have to allow for the plus and the minus version. So it's going to be plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Now, just to tidy up the right-hand side, on the left-hand side I have x plus b over 2a. On the right-hand side, just to tidy that up, I'll end up with plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on the top. And on the bottom, if I get the square root of the bottom, I'll end up with square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a. Now we're almost there. You can probably see we have a lot of the formula derived there already, but what we're going to do next is we want to just get rid of this b over 2a. We want to isolate the x. So I'm going to put the minus b over 2a here, got plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac here, and then 2a here. And then our final line then is just going to be adding these two fractions on the right-hand side. So we have 2a as our common denominator. That'll give me minus b here, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac here. And that's it really. That's our quadratic formula derived.